Episode of Deep Dive featuring Cliff Weitzman. Cliff, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I wonder if we could start, if you could just kind of give us a quick bio, like who are you, what do you do, what are you about? We've got more details in the video description of this live stream, but just for the people who don't know who you are just yet.
Cliff Weitzman. Cliff, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. I wonder if we could start, if you could just kind of give us a...
Okay, there we go. Hey, yes, so thanks for having me on the show. My name is Cliff Weitzman. I am one of the youngest people on the Forbes 30 under 30 list in the US. I am originally from Israel. I grew up there, and I moved to the US when I was 13, and I'm obsessed with learning and listening and audiobooks. So I learned English when I was 13 by listening to Harry Potter audiobooks.
Oh, no way.
Bro. Yeah. I still have the first chapter memorized. I listened to the first book about 22 times in a row. And I have dyslexia, which means that when I read, it takes me a lot of energy. And so when I started college, it was difficult for me to do all the readings that I needed to do. And so eventually I ended up building a text-to-speech system using AI for my computer called Speechify that let me upload any PDF and it would read it to me. If I wanted to read a specific passage on my computer, I could highlight it, click a keyboard shortcut, and it would read. I could scan things with my phone, copy-paste things. And it really made it so that I didn't need to do any homework for the most part. I would just have like 200 pages assigned for reading for the week. I'd upload it to Speechify, click play, and it would read. And I would longboard to breakfast and listen, eat breakfast and listen, walk into class, and I had everything already done. I built about 36 different products when I was in college, everything from 3D printed brakes for longboards and skateboards that I patented to biotech supplements, payments companies, iPhone apps and websites. I won MIT's hackathon twice. I won Stanford's hackathon twice. My current team on Speechify is 20 incredible people that work with me, predominantly engineers, who are distributed across the world. And I am just really into making myself the best person that I could be and being super productive. I'm obsessed with keyboard shortcuts. I read about 2 audiobooks a week to this day. And that's a quick intro.
Damn. Okay, that's quite a stacked resume. So a lot to dive into there. So I think the first thing is that a lot of people I know who kind of follow my channel are interested in the whole entrepreneurship thing. I recently made a video kind of talking about passive income and how kind of discovering the concept of passive income changed my life. Thank you, Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Workweek. And when I was at kind of secondary school and university, I also tried to make lots of these different things. And then kind of it was a case of throwing lots of things at the wall and then 1 or 2 of them would stick. But I think it was the experience of trying to build everything else that led to these successes. So I wonder, if you can take us back to kind of when you first got started with kind of building stuff, like how did you go about it? What advice would you give to people today wanting to kind of, they see your resume and they're like, oh my God, this guy's running a big startup. It's really cool. Like, how do I get there? What are the steps?
Absolutely. So the way that it started for me is, first of all, I'm the oldest of 5 kids. We're 4 within 5 years. And so actually all the kids in my family are super entrepreneurial. My brother Tyler, my sister Alex, both went to Stanford and got their masters there, and both run startup companies. And we all just work on stuff together. And it started when I was like 9 years old. I would go on walks with my dad, and I would ask him what he's doing and why he's doing what he's doing. And every time I met any adult, I would always like engage them in conversation. And I was always very intellectually curious. And I don't know why. I never have a filter around. I never thought that was a stupid question. I would always ask the question, and I was always confident about asking the questions. It didn't feel dumb for asking. And that meant that I just learned way more about the world at an earlier age than most people do. And at a certain point, I ran out of the information I could suck out of adults, so I needed to get it somehow, and so it became books. Because I'm dyslexic, reading was very difficult, but luckily I found audiobooks. So I would go up and down the aisles in bookstores, and I would take photos of them with my phone, and then I'd go home and I'd find the audiobook online. And like you, I found the 4-Hour Workweek when I was 18, right after I graduated high school. And so that book changed my life. And after that, I read The 4-Hour Body, which also changed my life. And I was like, wow, this whole Muse company thing is brilliant. Now, in reality, the Muse company is a little bit of a fallacy. It takes a lot of work, actually, to build a Muse company. And it takes almost as much work to build a Muse. And a Muse is a small company that gives you enough money to support your life, as it does to build a big company. But it's a good seed for a bigger company. So putting in those reps helps you start. So the first company that I tried to build is I did a science fair project in high school where I built a pressurized air cannon that you could shoot on houses that had a fire blanket that would choke the fire. And then the next thing that I built is a thing called Cliff's Coupons, where I would go business to business around my town, and I convinced them to give me a 20% discount, and then I sold a pamphlet of those coupons to other students in my high school. And then after I read the 4-Hour Workweek, I was like, wow, the internet is a great place to build things. So I tried to build a t-shirt company that sold like shirts with like positive slogans, got to Brown, and then I ride longboards, and so I lent my longboard to a friend, and an hour later I found him with a torn up lip and bleeding knees, and he told me that he was riding down this concrete hill at like 20 miles per hour, and he didn't know how to stop. So I designed a brake, and then I found there was no patent for the brake, so I learned how to write a patent, and I published that. And if you want to learn how to file a provisional patent for $65, I've made a video about it. It's pretty popular now. And that was kind of like the beginning. And I just kept learning how to build different things. Eventually I learned how to code, which for me initially was really, really difficult. And then I just persisted with it until I could make stuff. And once I did, I found that it's so much easier to make a product by coding than it is making a physical product, because you do not need to do tooling costs. It's so much faster. Like the first app that I built was a thing called, it was not the first app, but one of the first ones was called Starter Pack. And it lets you make a 4-image collage that represents your friends. And I coded it on 7 hours on a plane, landed, published it, and then 2 months later it had 100,000 users, just because it was a shareable piece of content compared to other things I'd worked on for like 3 years with not a lot of progress. So when I was about to graduate from university, I told myself I don't want to take a job. I want to work on my own things. And I asked myself, what is a thing that could be like $1 billion company that solves a very strong pain point, that creates real value, it's not based on ads, and ideally helps people who are similar to me. And I wanted something that is a smart app or website. And you know, I love Audible, and I thought the best thing for me to build is like something like Audible. But Audible is so great, I can't figure out how I can make it any better. But I also use text-to-speech so much that I thought, you know, maybe people would want to pay for a really high-quality text-to-speech system that sounds like a human, that's really easy to use. And so I built it. And initially I made a website that allowed people to pre-order the product. And people started buying it, especially people like me who have dyslexia and ADD. And so what happened was I learned about this conference called the International Dyslexia Association Conference. And I convinced United to give me a big discount on my ticket. I booked the ticket the night before, flew there, arrived at 10 a.m. in the morning, did not have a ticket for this conference. So I sat in the lobby until someone agreed to give me one of their tickets. And then I sat in the audience of 1,000 people. And when the keynote speaker finished speaking, I jumped on the stage and was like, hi, my name is Cliff. I built this thing I want to show you guys. And then I plugged in my computer and I showed them Speechify, which I'll show you guys in a sec, I guess. And 15 of those schools offered to fly me out to teach their kids how to use Speechify. And so whenever I would go, the average reading speed in the US is 180 words per minute on a digital screen, 200 words per minute on a physical book. People with dyslexia read at about 150, 160. So I gave people Speechify, and immediately they were listening at 220. And then I'd come back a month later, and they learned how to listen faster, so they were listening at 350 words per minute. And I'd have people crying, saying, oh my gosh. Actually, even before that, I made a video, before I made Speechify, on how to use text-to-speech for free on the Mac. And that video got 100,000 views on YouTube, even though I wasn't an active YouTuber. And 400 comments, people saying, I'm literally crying, my 4th grader is doing her homework by herself. So I knew that there was something there. And then I just built a more effective tool. I started posting on Facebook groups and Reddit groups, and then eventually recruited the rest of the team. And now Speechify is the 3rd best ranked app in the magazine and newspaper category of the AppStore. It's used by millions of people who read billions of words per month. So it was just kind of like little by little by little, and following the thing that I really needed help with, but I found other people benefited from as well.
Okay, awesome. So if I could take you back kind of towards the start, I think a lot of people listening to this are probably wondering that it sounds like you've got a lot of ideas, and so where do the ideas come from? Like, how do you think about what might make a good product, short of just kind of copying something out there that already exists?
Yeah, so I actually gave a TEDx talk about this.
Oh, did you? Oh, no way.
And yeah. It was like how to turn big ideas into reality. Step 1 is come up with the idea. And the key is to think to yourself, this sucks, how can I fix it? And that is a mantra that should consistently be running through your brain. So for example, if you're walking outside and it's cold, most people are like, shoot, it's cold. Instantly, reflexively, how can I fix it? And so maybe you can go inside, but maybe you could build something to fix it, right? Maybe you can build some sort of Gore-Tex gloves. Maybe you can like redesign your North Face jacket. Maybe you can build some heated bubble that you could put your head in, whatever. It doesn't matter. And I come up with the first idea, and as I'm walking to my destination, I keep iterating more and more and more ideas. And by the time I like gotten to my destination, done whatever I want, I'm walking home now, I will come up with something that is interesting, or I'll decide it's not a worthwhile path to follow. And the more often you ask yourself this question, the better you are. It's literally like a muscle that you have to train. And so it doesn't matter what the topic is. So that's the first way to come up with ideas. The second way to come up with ideas, and this is to come up with ideas that are good, is, for example, when I built that thing called Starter Pack, it started becoming popular to make photo-based memes. And so Starter Pack was a thing that was happening in society. There was just not an easy way to do it. So I went to Google Trends and I Googled Starter Pack. And I saw an exponential growth curve for how much people were searching Starter Pack. And I was like, all right, great. I definitely should be making this thing. And so you can come up with an idea from a pain, or you can come up with an idea from an opportunity. And ideally, you want to use both. So for Speechify, I really wanted to build a better text-to-speech system, and I had built one, technically. But it wasn't good enough for people to pay for. But then I read an academic paper about the application of artificial intelligence and deep learning to the higher quality text-to-speech, and I was like, aha, if this exists, it does make it good enough. And I listened to the quality that you could achieve, and I cried because I was like, wow, if this existed when I was 10 years old, my life would have been completely different in elementary school. And I do not know why no one has built it yet. I guess if they didn't build it, I got to build it myself.
Nice. Cool. You mentioned that, something that I say a lot is that even in 2020, I still think it's useful for people to learn to code. And the reason that I would give is that, yes, there's all these hashtag no-code tools, and yes, you can make a website with Squarespace and Wix and Webflow and blah, blah, blah. But even so, like, learning how to code is still helpful because, firstly, it kind of gives you an idea of what's possible. Like, I remember when I was first learning to code and I discovered databases for the first time. Suddenly, it's like your brain is elevated to like the next level of thinking where you're like, oh my God, literally every app I can think of is just a series of database queries. Like that's literally all it is. Facebook, Twitter, it's all just reading and writing from a database. Bloody hell, I can make a game. I can have a table for my kind of inventory, a table for my character stats. Oh my God, and it sort of like completely explodes. And if you don't know that databases are a thing and that you can read and write to them, you just don't have those kind of concepts. And so what I would tell people is that part one is it gives you an idea of what's possible. And part two is that it means that if you do come across an idea, tackling a pain point, come across an opportunity, it means you can build the version 1 of your product in a weekend by yourself. And then, of course, you can kind of hire your team of 20 AI experts to deal with it, but at least you've got the groundwork on your own. I wonder if you would kind of agree with that it's still probably useful for people to learn how to code today, and if you would want to kind of add anything to that as to what benefits there are of learning to code.
I would say more extreme than that. You cannot be a founder in 2020 without knowing the basics of coding. This is coming from a person who is dyslexic. So when I started to try to learn how to code, everything would break. Why? Because I would misspell the variable one way here and one way here. And when I started, I was using IDEs, it's like the Word doc for coding, that did not have spell check, and it drove me crazy. And I gave up on it multiple times. And so I did not start coding until I was 20 years old, and I took the intro to computer science class at my school, not freshman year, but sophomore year, second year. And everybody else did the first assignment in 3 hours. 7 hours in, I still did not finish this assignment. 9 hours in, I still didn't finish this assignment. 19 hours in, I still did not finish this assignment. And eventually I locked myself in the computer science lab. And what I did is I went to the dining hall, and I found a bag of bread. And when no one looked, I turned it all into peanut butter sandwiches. I put it in my backpack, and I just spent 24 hours in that computer science lab and finished that assignment. And I basically did the same thing for a month until I finally got good enough where I could tell the difference between a mistake as a result of a spelling mistake and a mistake as a result of a real bug. And after that, I started getting better. To code, you don't need to know math. You don't need a high school degree. And there's a difference between computer science and programming. Programming, like the front-end interface of a website or an iPhone app or an Android app, is actually super easy. it's the same level of difficulty as learning how to use Google Sheets or Google Docs. And so everyone can learn. Everyone can learn. It's just a matter of being persevering about it, and there's a lot of great resources on YouTube, etc. And so the reason why it's important is for exactly the same reasons that you described. It's also, if someone is then going to later work for you as a developer, you need to know what they're doing. You don't need to be better than them, but you need to understand the basics. And I'll take it even a step further. The most successful business that I built when I was in college was a thing called findmescholarships.com. And I was paying for college myself, and I had a bunch of loans, and that was the one thing stopping me from going to be an entrepreneur, because I feared that I had to get a job to pay off my loans. And I was like, well, I don't want to have that be the case. So in my third year of college, Tim Ferriss style, I hired 10 freelancers in the Philippines to find and apply to scholarships for me full time. And I uploaded a bunch of the databases of where you can get scholarships to my Slack chat with them. And then what I did is I found all the essays I'd ever written about scholarships or for school, and I uploaded them to a shared Google Drive. And I made a Google Sheet numbered 1 to 100, and I had my freelancers fill it to 100 with scholarships. And the requirements was it has to be stuff that was for someone who was Jewish, entrepreneurial, studying energy, studying math, above a certain GPA. That all of them had to be above $1,000. And at the time, I was not yet a U.S. Citizen. I was an Israeli and UK citizen. And so you had to be eligible as a non-U.S. citizen. And then I just had them add those scholarships to my calendar, and then I would process through them. And that worked well enough that I made a service that did this for other people. But I didn't want to code it yet. So what I did is I just posted about it on Facebook in a bunch of Facebook groups. And if you emailed me, I manually hired you as an assistant. I connected it via email. To charge you, I just had you Venmo pay me or PayPal pay me. And I realized the same thing as you, that this is all just a database. But I didn't want to code the database yet. So my database was a Google Sheet. On the y-axis, you had my students, and on the x-axis, you had who was their freelancer, what was their requirements, etc. And when that started to be good enough, I built an API that would integrate into Upwork and automatically hire freelancers for these people, automatically generate sheets for people, automatically dispatch the work. And then it became an automatic thing, and I just needed to check in once a week, and I hired someone else to manage the process for me. And so if I did not understand how databases work, it would have been much more difficult for me to design all that system. And so the other thing that's great about computer science is it's like learning another language that allows you to think in algorithmic ways. So for example, if you think about data structures and algorithms and how an array works and how you can pop things from the top and from the bottom of the stack, that's how I think about my priorities on a daily basis. So I highly recommend learning to code. It's way more accessible than you think. It's worthwhile.
Fantastic. All right. So let's jump around a little bit. So you've got this company, Speechify. How does it work, and how can I incorporate it into my life? Because I'll give you a bit of context. So I've been an Audible fanatic for the last, I think, since 2017. The first thing I listened to was the Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman on Tim Ferriss's recommendation, and then Stardust by Neil Gaiman, and then I was hooked on audiobooks. And then I discovered the Mistborn series, and then the Stormlight Archive, and then we can geek out about that a little bit later. But so that's kind of my background for Audible. And then it was only a few weeks ago, because before I was thinking that, well, I guess Audible is good for listening to fiction, but if I'm listening to nonfiction, if I'm listening to nonfiction, I would prefer to read it, because then I can highlight, I can take notes, blah blah. But then I listened to the Motivation Myth on 2.5x, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. I've gone through this entire book in 2 commutes back and forth to work, and I feel like I didn't lose out on much by not being able to Kindle highlight it. So I wonder how does kind of audio fit into your life when it comes to nonfiction stuff, and then we can talk about our shared love of Kaladin later.
Yes. Oh, Kaladin is my spirit animal. So, in my audiobook listening, I wake up in the morning, and the first thing that I do is I put in my AirPods and I start to listen. I listen while I brush my teeth. I listen when I go to the bathroom. I listen when I make my breakfast. And if there's not a friend there with me, I listen when I eat. And the only time I take my AirPods out and stop listening is when I'm sitting down to do work, or I'm sitting down to have a conversation with someone. When I finish working, when I get in my car to drive somewhere, I'm immediately listening again. And so every person has about 2 hours of passive time in the day when they're doing other stuff, driving, walking, cooking, eating, what have you, where you can be listening. And the amount of joy that I get from listening in that situation is just so astronomically high. It is one of the best habits that I have. At this point, I've gotten thousands of people to become addicted to Audible, including all of my family. And that's usually for pleasure, right? So 25% will be biographies, 25% will be fantasy, 25% will be sci-fi, and 25% will be like philosophy, business, etc. Now, that's just part of my listening. My other listening is Speechify listening. So I listen to about 150,000 to 200,000 words of Speechify per week. The average book is about 70,000 words, so I listen to about 2.5 books of Speechify material per week. And usually that is the material that I need to read for my work. So if you send me an email, I Speechify it. If I read a Wikipedia article, I Speechify it. If I am writing an email to you and I want to proofread it, I Speechify it. And so there's two ways to use Speechify. The first one is on your iPhone or on your Android, and the second one is on your Mac. So let's start by showing you how I use Speechify on my Mac, and then I'll show you how I use it on my iPhone. Okay. So I'm going to quickly share the screen with you. Share screen. All right, cool. So I'll remove that. Okay, so if you go to getspeechify.com, you can scroll down here. You can see little Cliffy when he was around and built the first version. And you can download the Mac app. So cool. I'll save that. Show in Finder. And then I can install that buddy. Great. Export into applications. Sure, I'll replace whatever. And it'll ask you to give it some access so that it can, the reason why it's important to download it from the website and not from the Mac App Store is if you download it from the website, it has access to text inside of other applications so it can read them to you. So I'll give you an example. If I now go to Wikipedia, and let's say I want to read about YouTube. I haven't changed anything. This is the speed at which I listen to everything, okay? And I can understand 100% comprehension. YouTube is an American online video sharing platform headquartered in San Bruno, California. 3 former employees, Chad Hurley, Steve Chen, and John Green, created the service in February 2005. Cool. So that's too fast for most people to understand. I can see up here that I'm listening at 649 words per minute. To give you context, 1x speed would be 200 words per minute. So I'm listening at about 3x speed. And what I can do is I use a keyboard shortcut. Keyboard shortcuts, which is Option S to reduce the speed. So I'm going to bring it down to 200 words per minute so it's a normal speed. Cool, so we're going to do it again. And I click Option to make it start speaking.
YouTube is an American online video sharing platform headquartered in San Bruno, California. 3 former PayPal employees.
I can double-click Option to pause, and then I can double-click Option again to make it continue playing again.
Chad Hurley, Steve Chen, and...
Now, that speed for me is too slow.
Yeah,
so I'm going to increase the speed.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that by clicking Option D. So Option D increases speed, Option S decreases the speed.
YouTube, American online video sharing platform headquartered in San Bruno, California. 3 former PayPal employees, Chad Hurley, Steve Chen, and John Green.
Now let's say I want to skip to this other paragraph. I highlight that paragraph by double-clicking it, and I click Option to start speaking.
YouTube and selected creators earn advertising revenue from Google AdSense, a program which targets ads according to site content and audience. The vast majority of videos are free to view, but there are exceptions, including subscription.
Cool. Let's say I want to go and I want to read an email that you sent me. So I can go here. Okay, what is this? So this is the newest email in my inbox. Oh.
YouTube and selected creators earn advertising revenue from... I was not even sure about writing this email, not knowing if you will write back to me or not, but then I said why not, since I am really desperate for a piece of advice. First of all, I love your channel, and I have been following you since you hit 5K on YouTube. Did I try out the things you suggested? Yes. But I am in a really bad situation.
Okay, hopefully the situation improves. But that is essentially how I would go around my computer and listen to anything in my computer. I listen to Word documents, I listen to PDFs, I listen... let me give an example with a PDF, because a lot of students consume information that way. So let's see if I can find... okay, let's read this document. So I just highlight this, I click Option to start speaking.
NWK activates Newark's restaurants to deliver nutritious meals to vulnerable populations, seniors, low-income families, the homeless, frontline.
Okay, now let's say I wanted to read a piece of text that I could not highlight. let's say it was in the middle of a YouTube video, there was a presentation from your econ professor, and so you can't highlight that text. So what I can do is I can click on this button, and then I can highlight that text like this, and it'll OCR it on the spot, and then it'll read it to me.
Restaurant jobs.
The easiest way to do that is actually to hit Option X, and then I can highlight that text this way, and then it'll capture it.
Our goal, 1 million meals served and 500 restaurant jobs created and sustained.
Cool. And the last thing that I can do is I can go here, and I can pick whatever voice I want. So I like the American male voice, but I can pick American female, British male, etc. So if we go this one.
Our goal, 1 million meals served and 500 restaurant jobs.
Now, the Mac app is less used than the iPhone app. The iPhone app is the most popular version of Speechify, and it is the one that has a much higher quality voice to it. And the great thing about it is you can walk around and listen. You don't have to sit at your computer. Thank you. So if you want to get the iPhone app for Speechify, the easiest way to do that is you can even go back to the website, scroll down here. I'm going to click Speechify for iPhone. I'm going to find it on iTunes. So you can see it's got more than 20,000 reviews.
That's a lot of reviews.
Yeah, this is actually just in the US. So if I go international, it's about 40,000 reviews that are all kind of like above 4.5 stars. And people tend to lifesaver. People tend to really like it. So if I want to go here, where's my Skype? Cool. So I can go on my iPhone.
Yep.
I'm going to click on the App Store, and I'm going to search for Speechify, speech, and then IFY. Oh, you see that? Audible pays for ads to advertise above us.
Oh dear. Right, I'm going to download it as we speak.
There you go.
Nice.
So you can download it from the App Store. And then the way to use it is you'll see that it gives you a little onboarding, and it gives you to choose from a couple of voices. Pick the one that you like. I think the default voice right now is actually the British female voice. So my mom is British, so it's based after her voice.
Nice.
That's my favorite voice. And then it lets you play around with the speed a little bit. So it starts you off at 220 words per minute. You can change it for you because you already know how to listen fast. You can listen faster. So I would set it to like 300 words per minute. And then you can pick what you want to listen to. So the first section on Speechify is actually the news section. And so what it does is it scrapes the most important news from all over the world, and it gives you that in the first tab here. And actually what we did is we made a daily Corona update because it's something people are often interested in. So if I click on that daily Corona update, it'll start reading to me.
Reuters/Joshua Roberts. The National Police Misconduct Database and Transparency in Hiring Act would create a public, searchable repository of police misconduct. The bill was announced Friday by U.S. Senator.
So that's like one of the voices that you can use.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the iPhone app is the one that uses like the AI stuff. So then let's try, for example, a U.S. voice. It's called Simon.
I am Simeon, and I am from the United States.
I'm Emma, and I am from the United States.
I am Eric, and I am from Australia.
I am Harry, and I am from Britain.
I am Stephanie, and I am...
That's so good. That's so funny.
Hi, I'm British male child voice.
And then you can even go like Indian voice.
I'm Amrita, and I am from India.
And what it'll do is actually it'll speak to you in any language you want. So for example, let's say I want to have it read stuff out to me in Spanish. So what I do
A Democrat from Oregon.
is I go to this listening screen on Speechify. I can click on the voices in the bottom right corner here. And then in the top right, I click on English to switch to another language. And let's say I want to listen in Spanish. So.
Soy Diego y soy de Europa.
Soy Conchita y soy de Europa. Soy Mia y soy de México.
So I can pick whatever language I want. It'll speak to you in Chinese, and Japanese, and Arabic, and Hebrew. And you can even scan text. So for example, if I want to go here, okay, this is going to be a nice live demo. So I have this text on my computer here, which hopefully you can now see. And what I'm going to do is I'm clicking on the camera view on Speechify. Hopefully you can see my phone.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to take a photo of this text, and I'm going to have it read it to me. Oh, your camera access. Boom. I just re-downloaded it from the AppStore. So give it permission. Boom. So then it scanned that text, and then I can add the file, and then it'll start reading.
Kitchens NWK activates Newark's restaurants. Kitchens NWK activates Newark's restaurants to deliver Newell meals to vulnerable populations, seniors, low-income families, the homeless. Frontline medical responders strengthening the neighborhood anchors and community.
Is I can go here. Let me go back on Skype again. Okay. I can go here into Speechify, and I can go, hopefully you can see it, not to the camera tab, but to the Files tab. So the Files tab is really interesting because I can import any article from Dropbox, iCloud, Google Drive, Pocket, etc. And I can send stuff from my computer. I could take stuff in from Evernote, and I can share stuff from Safari. So let's say I want to go to iCloud, and I want to upload a document. Let me pick this contract I've been reading through. What's the nice one that does not disclose information? All right, well, I'm going to pick this one. So this is a white paper about cryptography. So it's now loading that article for me. It's done. I'm going to click it.
Trust token. Advisor agreement with token_file name 1 equals N grant Cliff Weitzman. Advisor agreement. This advisor agreement is entered into between Trust Token Incorporated, a Delaware corporation company.
And then it's reading to me.
Nice.
So now this creates a 5-hour audiobook. And I can make it go as fast or as slow as I want. So this, for me, is life-changing. Because it means that when I sit at my desk and I'm consuming information and I'm reading my email, normally it just takes me a lot of energy to read. If it's a short email, I can read it with my eyes. But if it's a longer email, I'm also super ADD. So I can like look out the window and get distracted. But if it's speaking in my ears, even if I look out the window, it's still speaking. So when I come back, I don't need to restart at the beginning of the sentence. I don't need to restart at the beginning of the paragraph. It just keeps going. It's like you're a horse and you have blinders on. And especially now with coronavirus, everybody who does not have ADD now acts like they have ADD. And everyone who has ADD, it's like 10x ADD. We've seen like a huge rise in the use of Speechify just for this purpose alone. But it becomes even more powerful when you use it for longer format content. So if you're uploading a PDF, the last thing I want to show you is, let's say I go on my phone, and one option is I go and for example, we'll click on an article.
Contradict what police say in reports. Here's why some officers in Atlanta breaking the windows of a vehicle, pulling a woman out of the car. So
now I'm listening to some article that I picked up from the news section, but I can also just open Safari on my phone, and I can go to whatever article is interesting to me, and I can just click share in the bottom, share, and then I'm going to share it into Speechify from the share box, and then I can click listen now. And so now that's in my library, and I can start listening to it. There's a third product that we are about to release in about 2 weeks, and it's a much more powerful Chrome extension to Speechify that lets you have the AI-based voices on any website that you want. And it lets you kind of change the speed, have highlighting, change the languages, but in the browser. And that's the short of it of how I use Speechify.
Nice. Okay, cool. So a few questions on that point. So firstly, one comment that I often get when I kind of talk about productivity apps and sort of listening to stuff at 2x and 3x speed and things, people are like, bro, the point of life isn't to listen to stuff at 3x speed. The point of life is to enjoy, look at the color of the sky, look at the singing of the birds, and maybe listen to stuff at 1x speed, like, what's going on. And your thing is sort of like mine, but like next level. You're like, literally every waking moment I will have my AirPods in listening to stuff, which is what I've been doing recently. I'm on book 7 of the Wheel of Time series, and I'm like, I really want to find out what happens. And so how
you have to go to the Brandon Sanderson writing portion, so it gets better.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to get to the Sanderson stuff. But like, how would you address that? I imagine you've got friends who are like, bro, why do you have your AirPods in all the time?
Of course. So huge fallacy, and it's the type of thing that you would say if you just didn't try it. So here's the best explanation. Movies used to be much slower in pace than they are today, right? when Gone with the Wind came out, the movie, in like the 1950s, it was smashing box office hit. But Gone with the Wind is so slow. If you look at the dialogue, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. It is so slow. If you watch Gone with the Wind now, unless you're a real movie fanatic, you would stop in the middle. Because movies today are oriented to be so much faster. And the reason they have to be is because we spend our time on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, and we're used to fast gratifications. Our minds have gotten faster. So we need to move faster. And so movies are written to be quicker now. But it's also the case that if I made you sit and watch a TV show, but I made you watch it at 50% speed, so the characters were speaking like this, you'd stop. There's no way you'd keep going. It would be torture. For me, listening to a normal show is like that now, because my brain has just adjusted to being so fast. So I use an app called the Video Speed Controller. It's a Chrome extension that plays every video at 2.5x speed by default. And it lets me increment speed by 0.1 increments up and down. And it's a lifesaver. And so it's the type of thing where you would say, oh, you know, why are you reading so fast? You're reading at 500 words per minute? Are you kidding me? No, enjoy life. Read at 200 words per minute. Right? When I started reading with my eyes, I would try to read Harry Potter. And I would fall asleep every time in the public library.
Mr.
Because
and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud.
They were perfectly normal. Very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. I met my first girlfriend because we both had that chapter memorized. They went line by line.
Solid.
And I would fall asleep because my brain moved fast, but the input was too slow. And when I started to listen, it was faster. And then I got good at listening. And initially, I didn't speak English. I would understand maybe like 2 out of every 10 words, but I knew the storyline. So I knew what Harry was and what like Snape was and what Wand was and what magic was and what Hogwarts was. So I could put it in context. And little by little, I filled in the words. So when I started, I didn't listen at 1x speed. I didn't listen at 2x speed. I listened at 0.75x speed to Harry Potter. And I did that for the first like 3 times of listening to the book. And I started to fill in the blanks. And then I started to listen at 1x speed. And then I listened to 1.25, and then at 1.5, and then at 1.75, and 2x, etc. Now, Speechify does this really magical thing. It has an algorithm built into it called automatic speed ramping algorithm. And if you turn it on, it will increase your listening speed by 3 words per minute every 1,000 words. So you don't notice that your speed is increasing. It's like a lobster that's sitting in the pot, and the pot increases in temperature. You don't notice it's increasing. But you are getting better at listening faster. And the key to listening is always challenge yourself to listen at the fastest speed that you can listen at while still comprehending and not being 100% comfortable. Just seek discomfort. Just be 10% uncomfortable.
Oh, yes, theory. Nice.
And in that way, you will just it's unbelievable the impact on your life that you will have if you just do that little thing. It's like we type on our keyboards every day, but we usually do not increase our typing speed. And it's because we're not mindfully practicing typing. The same thing is true for listening. However, you don't need to mindfully practice listening faster because the computer is doing the work. So reading is a very active activity. When you read, like 70% of your brain is dedicated to decode the words on the page. 30% is dedicated to actually comprehending. When you listen, it's like 3% is dedicated to processing, and 97% is just comprehending. And so when you get good enough at listening and comfortable enough with listening starts to get boring because your brain has so much extra bandwidth, and that's when you look out the window, and that's when you check your phone. So when I was in college and I started to do really complicated readings, I needed to make sure that my entire brain was engaged. So I would increase the speed to 600 words per minute, and then I would play like Vivaldi's Third Concerto by Yo-Yo Ma at like 30% volume. So my brain was full. I got like 80% from like Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle, and like the 20% that was like floating around would listen to the classical music, and then I could just like sit for 2 hours and focus and not be distracted because my brain didn't need additional stimulation. It was all there. And if I got too comfortable, I would increase the speed. If I got to a section that was very dense, I would decrease the speed. And so, yes, life is wonderful. Do stop to smell the roses, but that doesn't mean that you need to move around at the pace of a snail.
Solid. We've got a comment from the chat saying, Cliff, please make this app available for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. I'm pretty sure you can just stream via kind of Bluetooth and whatever to those, so you can listen to stuff in the car as well with Speechify. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So here's a very interesting tidbit that I learned. So of our users, I sent a survey to ask people, why do you use this app? 30% of the people say that they use it because they learn better by listening than by looking visually. They're auditory learners, which makes sense. About 28% say either I listen faster than I read, or they say I read slowly. And then the last 30% say, or whatever is left, it's a breakdown between people who say I use it when I exercise, I use it when I'm driving, I use it when I'm cooking, I use it when I'm walking around, etc. Initially, everyone who used Speechify had dyslexia, ADD, low vision, or concussions. There's about 1 billion people in the Western world that fall into the disability category for whom it's such a big problem, you are saving their lives. Today, more than 80% of our users do not have a learning difference. They're professionals, mainly, or people in master's or college, who use it because it's such a more effective way of learning and just of making your life better and saving yourself time.
Sick. Okay. So one potential issue with listening rather than reading is this thing that you can't, it's at least in my head, it's more difficult to take notes and to highlight and to sort of actively engage with the material that you're listening to rather than reading. How do you, what's your workflow for this sort of stuff?
Yeah, this is a great question. So one cool thing that we've done with Speechify that you don't get in Audible and other places is you're actually using your eyes at the same time as you're using your ears. And so when I read, the PDF is open in front of me, the email is open in front of me. It's speaking it to me instead of me doing the work. It literally is, you are outsourcing the cognitive workload of computing the words, so you can focus more on the content as opposed to the work. Imagine when you're walking in the airport and you're walking on your legs, or you have the opportunity to step on whatever it's called, not the escalator, but the escalator that's horizontal. Speechify is like that. You're just outsourcing the work of walking. Now you might say, oh my God, it's terrible that you're walking less. Yeah, but I'm walking for a good percentage of the day. I'd rather be able to stand on the escalator right now and be able to concentrate on my phone call or look at the news or do whatever. That's what Speechify is. And so when I'm reading a PDF in that way, I still highlight the PDF. I still pause when I want to take the notes. And so that's for using Speechify. We're adding a function to the iPhone app that lets you highlight on the app. And then if you're reading a document that is shared with a bunch of other people, they see your highlights too, and it will let you annotate, etc. That's coming in the future. When I listen to audiobooks, to be honest with you, I do it as enjoyment, as passive. Usually it's not something that I'm doing for school. If it's for school, I use Speechify. And as a result, if I find a section that I really love, I pause the audiobook, I open a notes file, and I dictate the section that I really liked. But usually it's so much done for enjoyment that I look at my reading list as it's endless. There is no scarcity in the list of books I'm going to consume, and therefore any book that is even vaguely interesting goes on that list. And unless it's very much not interesting, I read it because it just takes me 2 days to get through a book because my workflow is so good at listening fast and listening passively. And I also re-listen to books. I am very, very good in taking information by listening. By the way, that's something that as you practice, you get better at. So when you're 10 years old and you start school in elementary school, no one expects you to have super high comprehension. No one expects you to be a really fast reader. In the same way, you shouldn't expect to be an expert listener immediately. It's something that requires a little bit of practice. So if you listen to your first audiobook and you go, oh no, this is not for me, I'm not a good listener, no, that's wrong. It's like trying to code something for the first time and thinking, oh no, I'm not a good coder. Well, you've barely tried. So you have to try 10 audiobooks, and only on the 11th have you had the practice to be able to tell if you're good at it or not. And I promise you, if you do 11 audiobooks, you'll fall in love with it. And so 3 things change. Number 1, you're able to comprehend more. Number 2, your speed will increase because your brain will get used to it. And number 3, you'll be able to multitask while listening better. You'll be able to drive, you'll be able to walk, you'll be able to cook, and listen at the same time because your brain has trained itself to do those operations.
Yeah, one thing I've been saying recently, sort of making the case for 2x listening. So actually, in I think last week's episode of my email newsletter, it just so happened that I was making the case for why listening to stuff at 2x, if not higher, is the way forward. And anyone who thinks differently is, that's the hill I'm going to die on if there is one. And have you come across that article from Morgan Housel about how to read?
No.
so his take on how to read is that, well, the way you want to read is that you want lots of inputs and you want a very selective filter, because there are zillions of books in the world. Like, there's no way anyone can get through even a fraction of them in our lifetimes. But you don't really know how good a book is going to be unless you've got like trusted recommendation. And so you want to have like lots and lots of inputs when it comes to reading, but you also want to ruthlessly cut any books that you don't, that don't take your fancy. And so when I started doing Audible listening at 2-3x, like whatever, it suddenly meant that I could have a much higher kind of serial like inputs of books, because if you buy an Audible, it's like a few pounds, a few dollars. Like, it is a drop in the ocean compared to the value you can, like the 4-Hour Work Week. At the time, I got a PDF illegal torrent of it, but it completely changed my life. And like, a book can change your life to such an extent. It's absolutely mental.
Any book, if you get the PDF of the book. So for example, by the way, the way to find any PDF is you search the 4hourworkweek.pdf on Google and you'll find results. There's other places that you can find it more janky. I think ZBooks is also really good.
Yeah,
if
LibGen
you get the
and all
PDF,
this, yeah.
Oh my God, LibGen is great.
Is so good.
If you find libgen.is something.
Libgen.is?
Libgen.is.
Yeah.
Find every PDF there for free. If you find the PDF and then you email it to yourself and then you open it in Speechify, you now have a free audiobook. Quick fast tip there.
Excellent. Yeah, and so I think when it comes to listening to stuff at high multiples, it also reduces the cost of a book, in the sense that the time cost of a book. Because if you're the sort of person that reads 3 books a year, they better be pretty freaking good books. Like, you can't just pick up, I don't know, like reread Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone just for fun, because it's going to take you 4 months to read that book.
Or read this random book called The 4-Hour Work Week.
Yeah,
that seems
exactly.
ridiculous.
It's like a scammy title, or I will teach you to be rich. Like, what the fuck? Who is this guy? I'm not going to read that book.
But such scarcity in your ability to read, you can pick and choose, and actually, that's when you're enjoying the flowers. Because if you can only read 3 books a year, the only thing that you will look at is like Picasso and Van Gogh, and that's it. But if you can afford to read 100 books a year, you will take a moment to stop and look at every piece of art. Absolutely. And you will go read.
Yes, and that's afford in terms of time, and not really money, because there are so many ways to get free books off of the internet. And so I think this is like the way forward. I'm definitely going to do a video about kind of why listening to stuff at multiple speed is good. And so there's a lot of nice sound bites we've got from this that I'll just kind of chuck into there if you're cool with that.
Absolutely.
So another question is, you said just before we started recording that you're obsessed with personal growth and self-development. Like, what does that mean to you, sort of very, very loosely?
Okay, so I had to like really codify this when I was applying to university, because I was trying to pick where to go. And we didn't know anything about the U.S. college system because I didn't grow up in the U.S. And so I just applied to all the Ivies, Stanford and MIT, and a couple of other schools. I applied to 26 schools in total. Most people apply to 6, because I realized that it's a lottery at a certain extent. And I wrote my essays, and I realized that the way that I wanted to choose my school is, my only fear in life really is not living up to my potential. Because I think I can do a bunch of great things, and it would suck to not be able to do those things, and to not be the person that I see myself as being. And I think a lot of this is impacted by reading a lot of biographies. So 2 of my favorite biographies is the biography of Theodore Roosevelt, which is the best audiobook. Like, oh my God. As he's like literally a human action hero. Theodore Roosevelt's biography. And the second one is the biography of Arnold Schwarzenegger, which most people think is a meathead, but in reality is a genius who like conquered 4 different industries. And so those people really, really develop themselves to be the ideal person. So my vision of myself is this person with like a big chest, standing on the top of the hill with a flag, leading thousands of people behind him, and like improving the quality of life of all these people, and like being happy and having good relationships and all that jazz. And like, that's what I want for my life. And I think that the key for it is just making yourself the best person that you can be. And so when choosing a university, I wanted to find the place that would make me the best person that I can be. And luckily I went to Brown, which I could not love it anymore. And I get to have best friends like Valentine who live with me, and Max Deutsch and all the people who I met there. And it is such a passion for me. It is really the number one goal in life, is making myself the best person that I can be. And books really allow me to do that. But it doesn't matter if it's training my brain, training my body, learning how to communicate better and being a better speaker, being better at making friends, being better at starting businesses. It doesn't matter because, and I'm going to steal Valentin's favorite quote, a little bit of slope makes up for a lot of y-intercept. So it doesn't matter if you start here and I start here. If you're growing linearly, actually, if you're growing like this and I grow like this, eventually I'll pass you, even though I came from like lower means. And then the best part about it is learning is actually adding to your derivative. So it makes your growth exponential.
Nice. Okay, so this sparks a lot of thoughts for me. So one of the things I'm starting to do is I'm trying to also kind of codify what I want to get out of life, in the sense that, like, especially with all this kind of YouTube stuff. Initially, I started making videos about how to study for your exams and things like that, and then sort of branched out into tech and then sort of a bit of productivity. But the thing that sort of the thread that I kind of want running through it is this idea of sharing the principles, strategies, and tools to help us live healthier, happier, more productive lives. And that is the sort of kind of fake tagline that I have, that I try and kind of run through on the channel. But then there's stuff like where does money come into it, and where do relationships come into it and stuff. And so I've been trying to figure out like what's like the systematic model for living life, and how can I sort of deliberately try and improve all these different domains of it.
I built this model 2 years ago.
Oh, sick. Okay, so at the moment on my model, we've got 4 things. We've got the money side of things. We've got physical health. We've got mental health / happiness / kind of internal state, and we've got, what's the 4th one?
Relationships.
Relationships, yes, absolutely. Is that your model as well? Like, what does it look
there's
like?
2 other parts to my model, but they're personal to me, and I'll share them later.
Okay, cool.
You share them too. I add music, and there's one other one.
Nice.
This area is only growing.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, I also have a category for music in mind.
Oh, okay, interesting. In terms of like production or singing or kind of all of the above?
All the above.
Sick. Oh, nice. Songwriting as well, or?
Yeah, I read a lot of songs.
Oh, amazing. Okay, that's stuff I'm starting to dabble with now. So you've got these different kind of categories of life. Like, let's talk about relationships. Like, how do you think about like improving relationships? Because another comment that I sometimes get is like, bro, why are you reading a book about social skills? Bro, why are you reading a book about charisma, about conversation? Like, you know, why are you trying to be someone that you're not? And I hugely rail against that side of things, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. Like, why are you trying to be someone you're not, Cliff?
You're opening an incredible Pandora's box. I'm going to answer the relationships question first, but I first want to touch about that model and about the money side, because it's actually the thing that gives people more anxiety.
Yeah.
So I just turned 26.
Oh, same.
23. I was very sad.
Yeah.
I usually do not like having a birthday because I like being young. And I was really sad to turn 23 because I thought that I would have $10 million in the bank before I turned 23. And I was like, I don't have $10 million. And I was actually like quite mopey about this for about a week. And then my dad was like, Cliff, what are you doing? And I was like, yeah, Dad, like I set this goal, I didn't hit this goal, blah, blah. And he's like, Cliff, look, when your mom and I got married, we had $30,000 to our name. But I knew that I had a law degree and I had an accounting degree and I could support our family. And it was enough to like put down a little down payment for a house. And so, and I could pay for the things that we needed. And I knew that I would make more money in the future. So I didn't need $10 million. And you don't need $10 million either. And the reason I wanted $10 million, by the way, is because I read Tim Ferriss's book. And he has an exercise of write all the things that you could want in your life and figure out how much money they would cost. Yep. And I realized that for me, it would be $10 million to have like 5 kids and a bunch of houses and be able to pay for college, etc. And I was like, that's an interesting idea, Dad. Let me think about it more. And so I happened to have a long flight that I was going to take to Israel. It was like 14 hours. And I opened Google Sheets and I built exactly the system that you described. I wrote, my age is 23. And the categories that I want to improve in are my business, my fitness, my relationships, specifically, I call it love, my progress in music, and I think there was like 1 or 2 other, and adventure. That was like, instead of happiness, I wrote adventure. And I was like, well, what are the goals that I have in my life? So in the love category, and logistics. So in logistics, I wanted to live in Palo Alto and like afford to have an apartment. For fitness, I have this thing called superhero standards, where I want to have the body of Thor. And I'm like, I hit all the categories except my arms need to be 15% bigger, which is why I'm sitting on a bench press. And so like, cool. To do that, I need to be able to pay for a gym. I need to have a card to go to the gym. I need to be able to buy high quality, high protein foods and not care about the cost. And so I like did the math of how much that would cost me per month. For the love category, I need to be able to go on dates. I said 2 days a week. If I want to fly to meet someone somewhere, I want to be able to do that. For adventures, I wanted to have 2 big adventures a year that I pay for and one that somebody else pays for, either through a program or a sponsorship or something like that. And I did all the math, and I realized how much money that would cost. And I was like, oh, wow, that actually doesn't cost a lot. I'm already good. And that was for age 23. So then I made a next cell in that sheet, age 25, age 24, 25, 26. I numbered it all the way down to 150. And I said, at this age, I expect to get married. Maybe at this age, I might have like my first, second, third, fourth, fifth child. At this age, I might want to buy a house. All of it is tentative, but it gave me a nice outline. And I figured out exactly how much money I would need at every single year of my life. And I was like, okay, my income needs to grow in the following ways to support the goals that I have. And really the idea that, and under fitness, another category, so I do this sport called tricking and parkour. And so I do like backflips and stuff like that, think of like Jackie Chan. And I had a goal of like 4 moves that I wanted to know that I did not know how to know. I did not know how to do. And so I went on Instagram and I found the person who is the best in the world at doing this move called a Webster. And I hired him to be my personal coach over FaceTime. And I paid him like a bunch of money per hour to do this. And I was like, any category, I want to hire the best coach in the world to do this for me. And luckily for everybody, if you go to learnmonthly.com, you can get excellent.com, right? Or .com? Yeah. .com. You can get the best coaches to coach you on anything. And so I was like, I spare no expense. And then I became happy again because I realized I had the ability to pay for all the things that I wanted to pay for, and I knew how to grow my income to support all that. Okay, now let's go into relationships. I had a bunch of goals about relationships. So how did I move the needle around the category of relationships? I picked up How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie when I was 14 years old. And I applied every single rule I learned in that book to the bus driver that drove me to school in the morning. And then I got a car, and then one day that car was in the shop, and I needed to take the bus again after 2 years. The guy could not believe that I was stepping back on the bus. He was so happy. He was like, Cliff, oh my God, I'm so happy to see you. I tried to pay. He was like, you did not pay on my bus. And then I sat next to him and we chatted like the entire time. And like it shows you the impact of the rules in that book. And like they're very, very genuine rules. They teach you how to smile, like and when to smile. They teach you how to give genuine appreciation to people. They teach you how to like not criticize. And like sometimes I might have the instinct to tell Valentine to bench press a little bit more quietly, but I can like phrase it slightly differently if I need to. And so that helps me a lot. So I actually reread that book every year because there's always something new that I pick up in it, and it takes me like a day and a half to finish. And so why do you want to be someone that you're not? It's like going to like a varsity, like an NFL player and be like, why do you want to be the athlete that you're not? Well, what are you talking about? Like I am running through life like I am a professional athlete in every category that I'm in, and I want to be the best version of myself that I can be. And relationships are the most important part of life. The most important decision you make is who you marry, who you spend all your time with, who your friends are. And so I literally, I don't care about my living situation. I have, in the last 3 years, spent half of those nights sleeping on an air mattress or a couch, and the other half of nights sharing a bed with somebody else. Usually it's a buddy or a teammate of mine. Because I really don't care. I'm very Spartan in that way. But I do care about being able to travel. And so the last quarter of 2019, I spent 2 weeks in a different city every 2 weeks. So I spent a lot of time in London and Paris and Nice and Australia, here in SF and LA. And the main reason for that is I wanted to make friends all over the world. And so a lot of the people who work with me at Speechify are people who read content I wrote on Medium, or they watched the YouTube video that I made and they sent me a message, and then either I flew to meet them or I flew them out to meet me. And then I collected this group of the most incredible people in the world who all live with me now because I convinced them that they should come out to LA to live with me. And my quality of life is so gigantically high because I get to spend my time with these people. And so, and for example, why am I an entrepreneur today and not working at Google? It's because I read The 4-Hour Workweek when I was 18 years old, and I learned how to hire virtual assistants. And you know what else happens? So I don't drink and I don't smoke. But before I went to college, I knew that I wanted to be able to go out every night, and I wanted to be able to talk to girls, for example. And so Tim Ferriss has this thing called Comfort Challenges. And I was like, well, if I'm not going to drink, I want to make sure that I have zero social inhibitions. So I did all the comfort challenges. I went into Starbucks and I laid out on the ground for 5 minutes. I went to a mall and I asked every person for their phone number. I would go to coffee shops and I would try to negotiate a 15% discount on my coffee. And those things helped me so much because I became the person who had zero inhibition. Every time like the president of the World Bank showed up at Brown, I hopped on the stage and I asked him for his phone number and we became friends. Like I just do this kind of stuff all the time, but I would not have thought to do this if I didn't read that book and then follow the advice in that book.
Nice. Okay. There's so much to dive into there. Just to kind of start off with, what value do you find in traveling? Do you enjoy kind of like the sightseeing, seeing temples and stuff, or is it more a people-based approach?
Yeah. So I'm usually a very grounded, very centered person, but I get anxiety if I'm not working. I like it's like a shark. If a shark stops moving, it dies. I feel the same way. And it is difficult for me to like disconnect from making progress because I just love it so much. And my disconnect is listening to audiobooks or writing music or working out. There's a really great book by Ramit Sethi called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And there's a concept that he advocates that changed my life. And it is be ruthless about cutting the things that are not important to you and invest everything in the things that you care about. So that's why I pay nothing in rent. And I invest all my money in flying to different places or paying for books or paying for coaches or doing stuff and buying myself high quality food. But like, I don't care about the clothes that I wear. I don't care about the things that I don't care about. I really do not spend anything on. When other people growing up described how much they wanted to go travel, I didn't feel the same thing. I had no desire to go see temples. I felt anxiety just thinking about it because I was like, no, man, I need to make myself better. I need to build my business empire. I don't have time to see these sites. I could do it later in my life. But when I started traveling, just because people convinced me to go travel, I met new people. And I think, by the way, the abilities that I developed by reading How to Win Friends and reading The 4 Hour Work Week, so I can like join a conversation in any cafe with any person and have them like accept me in, and then I'll make friends super quickly that way. It makes traveling so much nicer. So the only reason I travel is to meet other people. That's the only reason I travel. And usually when I travel, I never stay at a hotel. I always sleep on a friend's couch because then I get to meet all of their friends. So I'll give you an example, right? I'm wearing the Seek Discomfort t-shirt because when I came to LA just now, I was messaging with my friend Amar, and Amar was like, yo, man, do you need a place to crash? And I was like, sure. And I went and I slept on his couch for 5 days, and I met all of his friends, and then I started organizing soccer games between me and his friends, and then we all became like really good buddies. But it's because I had the opportunity to sleep on a friend's couch. And the same thing happens when I went to China and slept over at my friend Raz's place, or when I went to London and slept over at my friend Sinclair's space, or when I go to Brown and sleep over at Valentine's place. I just get to meet so many people, and that makes me really happy. And because I can do all my work from my computer and my team is remote, why not spend my free time meeting new people?
Okay. That's kind of cool. So that was sort of the vision that I had for. So I'm in my second year of being a junior doctor now, which is coming to an end in the first week of August. And so I'm kind of taking this gap year, this sabbatical year, where I.
At LA.
Oh yeah, that's one of the areas on the to visit list. But I was thinking that because I've read so much about people who kind of travel and like traveling being seen as this thing that you do just as almost as a rite of passage. When you travel, you get to experience different cultures and stuff. But most of the traveling I've done has been, you stay at a hotel, you stay at an Airbnb, you're just hanging out with your friends. You're not actually talking to people. You're just kind of visiting a temple here and there, and it's sort of almost like a to-do list. And so what I was envisioning is that it would be kind of cool to be like, all right, I'm now free for the whole year. I can fit all my camera gear in a backpack. I don't need this big ass fancy light because I can just use a window light wherever I am. So I could just kind of travel the world while kind of doing a bit of prep for the USMLE because I'm planning to maybe move to America to continue medicine, but I can just continue churning out my videos. And then the idea would be that I can just sort of post on Twitter, like, hey, I'm in LA. Can I sleep on someone's couch or something like that?
Yeah,
in cities where I don't know people. And, with a large enough following, I'm sure that there will be some amount of people in the world be like, hell yeah, come live with my family. And I feel like that would be a very fun way to travel the world rather than doing I'm going to stay in a hotel and visit the Eiffel Tower.
Mm-hmm. This is what I did.
So what does that look like? So do you literally just decide that, right, I want to go to this country randomly? Like, do you arrange it in advance? Like, what does the logistics of that travel look like?
I'll literally give you the logistics of a specific trip that I took.
Yeah.
And I took it because, so I did not do much traveling before I did this mental modeling of my life plan that I described before in a Google Sheet. And I was like, oh shit, I have to do 2 adventures this year because it's on my goal list. But I do not want to spend my time writing itineraries. I'm not a very I'm really good at organizing my long-term goals, and I'm really good at sprinting towards them, but I do not nitty-gritty plan the little things. I just like wing it. So I was visiting Valentina Brown. I was sleeping on his couch. We were sharing a bed, and I was like, Valentine, let's go on an adventure. And he's like, hell yeah. And we were like, let's go to Thailand. So we like started planning to go to Thailand, but I was like, Thailand's far away, and I'm going to be working in San Francisco. Let's go to Hawaii. So we were like, great. So all we did is we booked 2 tickets, and I booked a car, and that's it. We did not make a plan. We did not book a hotel. We were going to be there for 10 days. And then the time came to go, and we went. And on the plane there, we made a Google Doc, and we wrote out a Hawaii extreme adventure, because we are both like extreme sports type people. Like, what are the things that we could do? Cliff jumping, swimming with turtles, climbing a volcano. And we just like wrote down all the list, and we're like, we're going to do this list. And then we got there, and again, we don't care about accommodations. So we rented this wonderful Grand Cherokee Jeep, and we just slept in the car the entire time. We like drove, we slept in the car, we jumped off a cliff. We drove, we found a volcano, we climbed the volcano, we like entered the volcano, and then we came out, we slept in the car. We like would go to hotels and like sneak into the gyms and like put in workouts and like make friends with the staff, and then like they'd invite us to go in like the hot tub or the ocean or whatever. And it was the best possible experience. We would like drive into a Walmart, and we would fill the back of the car with oranges and peanut butter sandwiches and like protein bars and like play music. And it was incredible. And we met so many fun people, had so many great adventures. We at one point, we circumnavigated Big Island, and then we flew to Oahu, and we didn't have a car there, so we slept in a hostel, and we made a bunch of friends from the people that lived in that hostel. But we did not have a plan going in. But we were very biased towards action, and we just went for it, right? So I'll give you another example. I was in Palo Alto, and I wanted to escape. So I booked a flight to London. We're 5 hours away. And I packed my little duffel bag. And, I never traveled with a suitcase. Really, in reality, all my stuff could fit into my backpack and my duffel bag. I hopped on the plane. On the plane, I met this wonderful Swedish girl who's like super into CrossFit. So we went super deep into her life, and like why she like lied to her mom when she was young, and like why she had her breakups. Like we went really deep. And so she became a good friend of mine. So if I go to Sweden, I'll always go visit her. And then I landed in London. I met up with my friend Sinclair. He took me to dance salsa. And then my friend Simon, who was also there, was like, I'm about to fly to Germany. And I was like, great, I'll fly to Germany with you. So literally, I landed in London after planning 5 hours ahead of time. I went out. 4 a.m, we got back home. I stayed, I slept for like half an hour. And then I got on a train. I went to the airport, and I flew to Germany. No plan in Germany either. Landed in Germany. And then once we got there, we decided which city we were going to go to. We booked a hotel there because I didn't yet know anybody. And then later I found a place to stay that a friend of mine had. And then I started chatting to this guy, Jacob, who has an app called Reflectly. And the reason I was doing that was I wanted to run better Instagram ads and Facebook ads for Speechify. And actually, no, I wanted to write Google ads. And I had an issue coordinating the attribution from Google Ads to Firebase to figure out, did someone click to convert? And I could not for the life of me figure out how to do this. And so in the end, I was like, you know what? Screw this stuff. I went to the App Store. I found 100 top grossing apps that have subscription-based social ads, and I emailed every CEO and every head of growth. And then I did the same thing. I Facebook messaged all of them, and I Instagram messaged all of them. And when they didn't respond, I messaged again and again. So finally, this guy Jacob responds, and we hop on a FaceTime call exactly like this, and we chatted. And it was a really good call because we had a lot of things in common. So we had a follow-up call a week later, and then a follow-up call. And he goes, this is really fun, and he's really into books. You should come visit us in Denmark sometime. And I was like, great. How about Sunday? So I booked a ticket to Denmark, and I flew to Denmark. And then I stayed there for like 3 days, and I met his entire team. So now I have a bunch of friends in Denmark, and he became one of my closest friends. And then he introduced me to more friends. And that's how I live my life.
Is this, are these kind of like bursts of travel sort of,
yes,
where you think I'm going to go on this kind of adventure for a few weeks, or is it sort of like a year-round type tactic?
I make sure to never sign a 12-month lease anywhere. I prefer to do month-to-month, or to do 3 months, or ideally to live with someone else in their place, and I'll pay for all the food and or rent or whatever. And that gives me the freedom to leave whenever I want without being burdened with the sunk cost of having a 12-month lease. And so I do have like a lot of trained muscle in negotiating with landlords to give me shorter term leases because it's something that is important to me. And I will even pay a slightly higher fee just to make sure that I can have a shorter term lease. Usually I like to hunker down somewhere for like 2 months and like get everything done, but with the plan of escaping. So for example, I'm now in LA. I considered either going to London or LA. LA was better for a bunch of business reasons because I started doing a lot of collaborations with people. And so my plan was to be here for 3 months, and at the end of our lease, to fly to live in Beijing for a month or two. And then after Beijing, I was going to go to London. But then COVID hit, so I couldn't do that. And Valentine and I had a bunch of more travel planned. And so I'm going to do that, but later. So I just extended my lease here. We considered moving to another house. It ended up not working. Instead, I just invited a bunch more friends to stay with me here. And I would drive out of my way to make sure that I can pick them up, to make sure that they're here. Because, and the other thing is I surround myself with people who are more motivated than me for everything. So then it's so easy to have good habits when you're around other people who have good habits. And so if there is an opportunity, I just book a flight and go there. Even if I have the lease. And then once I'm somewhere, if there's a good opportunity to go somewhere else, I go there. If not, I go back to the home base. The critical part is my work still comes ahead of everything else. I wake up in the morning and I open my computer and I start to jam on the work that I have to do. And so I don't get anxiety about traveling because I still get to work. And you can't force me not to work. All I need is an internet connection and a cafe and my computer and I'm plugged in. And then if there's an event that is engaging and interesting, then I go to that event.
Damn. Okay, this is this is making me kind of rethink the way I want to live my life, because what you're describing is sort of what I've had in mind as sort of almost like a dream scenario. But in the back of my mind, I was sort of thinking that, well, I don't know how possible this is really going to be, in the sense that
if there was no COVID right now, I would tell you, Ali, book a flight right now and come visit me in LA tomorrow. Bring your computer and do it for the weekend, whatever. But yeah, when you can. But keep going.
Yeah, so because I think I feel like for me, there's sort of these two aspects of my life. There is the fact that I'm a doctor, which is a very, very traditional sort of, you follow the path and you know exactly where you're going to end up. And then there's this whole sort of Tim Ferriss passive income, sort of start a company, build a SaaS product, build more passive income sources, build an audience on the internet, become a YouTuber. There's kind of that side of thing, which is very you just sort of take opportunities as they come and you don't think too hard about this kind of stuff. And I've been kind of thinking, well, I think I want to stay in medicine long term, but I think for me, an ideal state of affairs would be where I'm a doctor for fun, maybe 2 or 3 days a week, working in the emergency department, with the option of kind of doing that in different places around the world, because if you work in the emergency department, that's a very transferable skill across different hospitals. The nice thing about that is then you then tap into a pre-existing social network in whatever country you end up in. You're like, hey, I'll pull a few shifts in the emergency department, and then I'll make some friends. And then the rest of the time, just kind of do this thing, almost like this thing that you're doing, where you know what, I kind of had in my mind that I want to learn snowboarding. Because I've done skiing, but I've never done snowboarding, and snowboarding seems cool. Why don't I live on a Japanese ski resort for a few months, take snowboarding lessons every day, at the same time prep for the USMLE and continue to churn out videos, that sort of thing. But I've never really met someone or sort of spoken to someone who actually lives that sort of lifestyle. So it's all very inspiring.
The thing, by the way. So I am not a doctor, but I really like science and the body. And I used to work on a lot of biotech products before I started Speechify. And I was visiting South Africa, and someone had a conversation with me, and they knew I was into this kind of stuff. And so she organized for me to shadow the #1 pediatric surgeon in South Africa, who works at the biggest hospital in the Southern Hemisphere. And so this guy does private practice for a couple hours a day, and then the rest of his time he spends at this very, very impoverished hospital. He's a superhero. He wakes up at 6 a.m. and he goes to sleep, I don't know when, but he's working the whole day. So I sat in on 7 surgeries, literally standing there seeing it. Could have never done it in the US or the UK, but I learned so much. And so they are super understaffed. And so if you showed up, I'm sure they would use you. And I made friends with a bunch of people in that department, and those are the most epic people ever. And so that is an example of just traveling to a random place, a completely other spot in the world, and getting involved in that category. And then a friend of mine was like, hey Cliff, I'm going on a ski trip in Japan. And I was like, great, I'm in. So I flew to Japan. And for some reason, I had another friend who was doing a ski trip in Japan. So I did one ski trip in Japan in the southern part of Japan, and then I flew from there to the northern part of Japan. I did a ski trip there, and then I have a couple of friends that I share my location on Google Maps with. So I saw that I had a buddy from the U.S. His name is Felix Krause. He built a thing called Fastlane. Felix was in Seoul, Korea, and I was like, "Oh, Felix, let's meet up." And so turned out he showed up at the same ski resort that I was, and then we just like hung out there. And then I had like a talk in the East Coast. So I flew back to the East Coast, and then I went back to California. But it makes it super easy to do it.
This is absolutely ridiculous. Like, and your stuff fits in a backpack and a duffel bag. And because I guess having a suitcase is just a bit too much friction to just sort of up and go whenever you want.
This is the bag I travel everywhere with. It compresses it to absolutely nothing.
Oh, is that the North Face one?
No. I bought it for $19 on Amazon.
Oh, no way.
And I buy these bags as presents for everybody. The brand is
okay.
Net, and you can find it on Amazon. It's like the maximum dimensions that you can fit as a carry-on. It weighs nothing, and I don't care about carrying it. I also just want to make something clear. Like, it's not that I travel because I'm like loaded. I buy all my flights with points. And I buy all the flights with points because I run ads for Speechify.
Oh, nice. The Tim Ferriss approach.
Unlimited amount of points on my credit card. So if you can find an excuse to have your credit card be used for paying, look if your father has a business or if your friend has a business, be like, yo, just use my credit card for a week. And you can also sign up for different credit cards and get the bonuses, etc. Like traveling, you can do it for free.
Yeah, I've been doing that with the American Express British Airways card since, I don't know, like 2016 or something, just running all our Google Ads, Facebook ads, like everything goes through that card. It's a bit annoying to then file the expenses, but it gets you points and, you know, get upgrades and flights and stuff, which is kind of cool. So I noticed that when we were talking about happiness, instead of happiness, you called it adventure. And I think that's something that Tim Ferriss also says to an extent. I wonder if you could just kind of share your thoughts about, like, what does happiness mean and why is kind of adventure the word that you prefer for that?
Yeah. So there's another, again, The 4-Hour Workweek is a great book about entrepreneurship, but about life philosophy in general and productivity. It notes to anyone who is going to read it, Tim Ferriss sounds like a jerk in the first 2 chapters of the book. So stick through it. And I just talked to a friend who tried to read it 2 years ago. It really was not their jam. And then they read it now and they love it. So it grows on you. So there's a section in the book where he talks about stress. And the opposite of stress, people don't realize, it's not happiness. It's eustress. Like, that is the opposite of stress. So eustress is positive stress. It's putting yourself in a... So the way I look at it is pain is force times resistance. Okay? But when I lift, I love it. Like, there's so much adrenaline. There's like, my body feels great. And it's because that's force, not times resistance. You add a negative there. It's times acceptance. And so it's just entirely joy. And so for me, my happiness, which is the thing that you want to optimize for, but if you go more philosophical, Aristotle calls it eudaimonia, living the good life. So there's eudaimonia, and there's like momentary joy or bliss. Those are the 2 styles of happiness, long-term and short-term. The long-term comes from like being fulfilled, from good relationships, from creating value, etc. The joy comes from like eating a nice piece of cake and like having your body feel good, etc. Okay, so I, other than Valentine, am the happiest person that I know. And there's a really cool exercise that you can also do called the Wheel of Life, and it helps you kind of break down the different categories and rank them out of 10. I highly recommend that exercise as well. And it's because I have like pillars that make me happy, and I make sure that those pillars are high. And so those pillars for me are spending time on love and family and significant others and friends, spending time on music, spending time on exercising, and spending time on working on the things that make me happy. And like, I always make sure to hit those things. I am a super productive person, but I consider time spent on love to be productive. And so I always make sure that I hit those goals. Notice that I actually don't care very much about sleep because I find that my body runs really well. It's not something that I optimize. Valentine optimizes for sleep. I should optimize for sleep because I think we're going to live to 150, and at a certain point we'll be able to slow down aging, and I want to have my body be as young as possible, but put that aside for now. And so I optimize only for the things that I want, and I'm ruthless about cutting everything else. And I make sure to get those pillars, and that just keeps me happy. And so my happiness is a function of my relationships, my fulfilling work, my fitness, my music, etc. That's in the long-term happiness. And then you can add spikes of joy in the middle, and those usually comes from adventures. And those adventures are like, that is excitement. That is like, so we talked about fantasy, and fantasy just informs so much of my life. I basically see myself as the hero of a fantasy book, and I just walk around during the day. I am Kaladin. I am Redskin. I am not Harry Potter because he's not cool enough. I am fucking Hermione, walking around through my life. And then the more adventures I can pack in there, the better.
Okay. So you've got kind of this sort of general baseline contentment that comes from these kind of different areas of life and actively working on them, ruthlessly cutting out everything else that doesn't fit those things, or not spending any money on it at all. Like, you know, you couldn't care less what sort of bed you sleep on, for example. And then you kind of got these adventures, which you've kind of said twice a year that you pay for, once a year that someone else pays for. That's pretty cool. Do you think about kind of wider purpose at all? And I kind of ask because one thing that I've been thinking a lot about recently is that since reading The 4-Hour Workweek, I think I discovered it when I was like 18 as well. But like for the last 8 years, my like a big North Star in my life has been this idea of becoming financially independent. Because for me, like realistically, the worst case scenario is not that I'm going to end up on the streets and homeless. Like that could happen, but just in terms of probabilities, it's pretty unlikely given the society I live in, given my level of privilege and the fact that my mom's a doctor. Like it's basically not going to happen. For me, like the realistic worst case scenario is I end up shackled to a job that I don't enjoy. And I know thousands of doctors, like hundreds of doctors who they sort of enjoyed it at the beginning, like med school was kind of fun, but then you do the job and you realize actually this isn't as fulfilling as I would have liked it to be. There's so much admin, there's all this other BS that goes with it. And the question that I ask everyone is, you know, if you won the lottery, would you still do medicine? And
wow, good question.
In the last 6 years, not one person has said, yes, I would continue to do what I'm doing. Half of the people have said, I would leave completely. One guy even said I'd leave in the middle of the operation. The other half of people, wow. Exactly. The other half of people have said that I would continue doing medicine because it's fun and fulfilling and stuff, but I would definitely go part-time. And so that has been in the front of my mind for years and years, being like, okay, I do not want to get to a point where I've got, you know, family, kids, mortgage, and I'm forced to go to work because I've got this lifestyle that I need to be able to afford. And so for the last 8 years, it's always been, okay, cool. Like when I'm thinking about, I've got a free weekend, what do I want to do? Assuming I've done the stuff I need to, it's like, okay, let's figure out how to increase my kind of source of passive income to mitigate against that risk. But I was kind of thinking that I haven't yet done the Tim Ferriss Dreamline exercise where you kind of pick your number. But at the moment, like through like the businesses, the YouTube channel and stuff, like I'm way beyond what that number would have been. Like for any reasonable, like obviously it's you know it's not like a lavish lifestyle, but like I don't need that much to make me happy. I just need a laptop, a decent internet connection, and a camera, and I'm good, and maybe a guitar in the background. And so I've been thinking now that okay, what's like the bigger purpose here? It's no longer just to make money so I can live life on my terms. And I haven't been able to find an answer. Do you think about that at all? Like sort of wider purpose, what comes next once you've ticked off that kind of box of financial independence?
Yeah, I thought about this very early, and I picked my business as a result of that decision. Okay. So here's the calculus that I did, right? I was a student in college at Brown. I'm about to graduate. I initially had a lot of loans, and I was like, screw this. I'm finding a way to get from under these loans, and then I built findmescholarships.com. And now I had some freedom. And I didn't know what I wanted to work on. So I went and I taught computer science for a summer, and then I came back to Brown. I convinced my professors to sponsor me as a visiting scholar to stay. So I actually lived on campus, could vagabond classes, was on meal plan, but did not pay tuition. It was fantastic. And I just worked on projects. And I was like, well, what type of business do I want to build? Well, number one, it needs to be, I am a very ambitious person. I love leading teams. I love creating value. I realized when I was young, I wanted to be Prime Minister of Israel, a billionaire, and a pop star. At this point, politics has too much red tape. I think Elon Musk creates more value than Obama, or than the president of the U.S. does. I still want to be a pop star, and I will be, but it's not as big of a priority as Speechify for me. So let's get to billionaire status first. But I actually don't care about being a billionaire. It's a great essay by Emerson called On Wealth, where he talks about how humans have the ability to apply their thought to matter, rearrange atoms in a certain way, and then create value that is greater than the sum of its parts. So we give, as an example, Thomas Savery, who built the steam engine. Right? Those are a bunch of like metal scraps on his workshop bench, and he made the steam engine, and it just made the world so much better. And then you multiply it times 1,000 times 1,000,000, And if you look at it from an economics perspective, you shift the PPF curve to the right. You increase the overall resources in the world. And as a result, everyone's quality of life goes up. If you think about it in terms of utility, there's diminishing marginal returns to utility. So the less resources you have, if I give you $1, the more increase in value you have in your life. So the more I can increase the resources in the world, the better for everyone.
Yep.
Now, I fell in love with this idea of creating value. So I actually care much more about creating value than I care about being a billionaire.
Yep.
It's just that usually a very good heuristic for who's created the most value is bank accounts. Not always, but often. If you think about Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, etc. Now, financially, what I do want is to have enough money to meet my goals as described before. But like you, I'm already there, because when you shift your goal to that, like I know what my goals are, and I want to be able to cover those expenses for this year. Most people are already there. So, but I still want to have the cushion, because when I'm older and I have kids, I need to support 5 people's dreams, not only one. Or in my case, 7, because I want to have 5 kids. Okay, so then you go, well, so what should my company be? Because that's what I'm going to spend most of my time on. So ideally, and once I'm financially independent and once I have my family, I want to shift to doing good in the world. So if you look at like Michael Bloomberg, for example, I highly recommend his biography too. He built Bloomberg LP. He's worth like more than $80 billion. It's one of the most incredible financial firms in the world. And then he started the Bloomberg Philanthropies. And every year, Bloomberg is like the 3rd most charitable person in the world. He's donated hundreds of millions of dollars to many, many hospitals. He has this line, which is crazy. He's Jewish. He goes, when I go to heaven and God judges me, I'm not going to wait for his decision of whether I'm going to heaven or not. I'm just going to walk right in, because he's done so much good in the world already. And so I thought to myself, I want to build $1 billion business, but I might as well build a business that does good already. So I actually don't want to build a SaaS company. I don't want to build a financial company. I want to build something that does a lot of good. And it took me a long time to figure out what that thing was. And the reason I built Speechify is when I was 10 years old, the most difficult challenge in my life was being dyslexic. It was so difficult for me because my dad was my hero and I wanted to be like him. And no matter what I did, I could not do it because I could not learn how to read. And I could not be the person that I wanted to be. And so eventually I found a way around it with audiobooks and then with text-to-speech, and it completely changed my life. And there's a line that I live by, which is, above all else, the most important thing is to be the person that you needed most when you were young. And when I was young, I needed my mom to read my books to me, and I wished there existed something that allowed me to point it at a book, and it would read it to me. And so I built that for me, and now I'm making sure that everyone has access to it. It doesn't matter if you're American, or you're Chinese, or you're in Africa, or you're poor, or you're rich, or you have dyslexia or not. You should have access to Speechify. So that's why I'm working on this company. My goal is to solve dyslexia. At the same time, I help a lot of people be more productive and learn more, and it is a business that's going to be like a multi-billion-dollar business. So I picked the business really well, where while I'm creating my own wealth, I'm also just like significantly increasing the overall quality of life in the world. And I'm also doing it, and this is what I realized after doing some experimenting, to be honest, I get more pleasure when I help improve the lives of people who are similar to me. So dyslexic people are similar to me. Productivity people are similar to me. And because they're just like more similar, satisfaction is higher. So that's why I work in this business. So my recommendation as you're making plans to everyone who's listening around what you want to do in life, number 1, write out your short-term goals that selfishly make you happy, and then make sure that you have the resources to hit them. Number 2, think about what your goals are going to be when you're 30, when you're 35, when you're 40, and you're going to have kids. And that's how you should make your financial planning. And everything after that is how do you create value in the world and do good. For you, it's saving lives as a doctor. For me, it's building technology that helps people with stuff like Speechify. And there will be more things that I work on. Like I spent 5 hours at the Black Lives Matter protests in LA yesterday and the day before. I made a lot of videos about it. I talked about it. I even started drafting a bill about it. And I get passionate about random stuff every once in a while. Once I get to the level that I hit my goals in fitness and parkour, my goal is to have a #1 hit song on Spotify, and that's going to happen too. And I'm going to approach it with the same methodical laser focus as I do everything else in my life. And so there's this revolving list of goals that make me happy, and I just spend every day chasing them. And so that means that for me, there's always meaningful work.
Okay. On the topic of goals, so this is something that I've been asking people about recently as well, because the way I see this, there are sort of 2 ways of approaching goals. There's the way of, okay, set these goals, make sure they're specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely, blah, blah, blah. Set these goals and kind of work towards them. And then once you've done that, you set another goal. But then there's the sort of Jason Fried Basecamp approach to goals, which is more like, screw goals. Why do you need goals? Just kind of do what makes you happy and what's fun and what kind of creates value, and the goals will take care of themselves. Like, it sounds like you're more of a goal setter, but I feel like the philosophy is more nuanced than just set a bunch of goals and keep on hitting them. If that makes sense.
Sorry. Say that one more time, please.
So the question was like, what is your philosophy about goal setting? I feel like it's more nuanced than just set a bunch of goals and then work towards hitting them.
Right. Absolutely. So I think one key to my happiness is I'm actually very forgiving of myself. If I don't hit my goals, I don't like wail on myself. I'm like, oh, I didn't hit that goal. That's fine. Let's update it. I gave you a perfect example when I didn't have $10 million by the time I was 23. It took me like 2 days to feel happy about it because hindsight 2020, I worked my butt off. And I was very strategic about it, and I was very smart about it, and I was very satisfied with what I did. If you take all the knowledge in my brain right now and you reset it in the head of an 18-year-old, I probably would have $10 million by that point. But like, I didn't have that knowledge. I now have it. Great. But I enjoyed the ride the entire way.
Journey before destination. Yes. Oh man, the Night's Radio. Love it.
Great segue.
Yeah.
And life before death, the journey before strength before we. Which brings us back to do good for the world for the people who don't yet have the opportunity to, and Black Lives Matter, and go improve the lives of people with dyslexia, save people's lives. This is why Kaladin is it's just me and yeah, there. But answer your question about goals. You are not tied to your goals. Your goals are not weights that like you are responsible for or you have an obligation to. It's like you're driving you're flying a plane. And there's an island here, an island here, an island here. And you can go to those islands and it's like fun. You can go and visit them for fun. Or you can just keep flying. Like literally life is like a video game. And you can decide to do whatever you want. So like in parkour, I really wanted to do a backflip. And so I trained and then I could do a backflip. And I wanted to do a Webster. So I trained and now I can do a Webster. And now I can like front flip off the front of a building and like do everything that you see a superhero do in a movie I could do. But it's because it was the thing that like for me, that seemed the most fun thing to be able to do. And then now the most fun thing is to build a company that solves dyslexia. And then I know that the next thing I'm probably going to want to do is be a pop star. Now, I really want to build a computational neuroscience company, and that's going to be something that I build at some point in my life. But I know that if I take a realistic accounting of my resources and where the world is at right now, computational neuroscience company right now is probably not the thing to do. It'll be an amazing thing to build in 15 years when we've like accelerated the rate. And that's why I built Speechify now, because deep learning and artificial intelligence just got to the point where it can allow me to build a piece of software like this. I could not have done it before. In fact, this company makes even a little bit more sense 4 years from now, but I want to be the person building it, so I'm building it now. And so if I don't hit my goals, I forgive myself immediately and I reset new goals. And the goals are only there to make it so that you can accelerate quickly. And it's not about like measuring anything. It just helps you along the way there.
Yeah.
And it's really journey before destination.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It's like you pick a goal in order to set which direction you're pointing almost. And then you sort of think about focus instead on the system that gets you there. But like in a way that's not just kind of flailing around and playing the same 4 chords on the guitar. It's actually thinking, okay, what does it take to get a #1 hit on Spotify? What are the characteristics of it? And just that thought process, treating it almost like it's a video game, is itself fun. And this is one of the things where I often tell people, like, if people ask me for advice, like what do I do over the summer? My advice is often that if you're not sure what to do, like pick something you enjoy doing and figure out a way to monetize it. Because now you've got this existing, just this layer of challenge on top of this thing that you already enjoy doing. Like I started learning close-up magic in order to kind of just impress people at school. But then I was like, okay, now how do I monetize this? And then that made me go out of my comfort zone to sort of try and do gigs at restaurants, and it was like super scary. And but just the act of trying to monetize something just makes it kind of more fun. And this is another. What you just said now is another thing that I've been trying to codify recently, which is that life is like a video game. And I think there are thousands of analogies that you can draw with video games, and how kind of thinking of life as a video game is just like a way of sort of framing a lot of things. Like a few that I like are the idea of leveling up your professions, and like leveling up is itself just like so fun. And if I was big on playing World of Warcraft back in the day, and if you like look at it objectively, you're like, well, I'm sort of fighting this boss so I can get a level up, which means I can fight more bosses, so I can get gear and then fight more bosses and then play end game with my 25. But it's leveling up that's just so fun. And when you do that in real life, like, I discovered triads on the bottom 3 strings of the guitar the other day while following a music theory course. I was like, oh my god, this is amazing, I can do all this stuff. It's like leveling up in a video game, and there's a real kind of joy to that.
Yeah. So one of the joys in life, in my opinion, is mastery, right? Like, I have mastery over tricking and parkour. I can just blast music and it's playing, right? My brother can play any song by ear on the piano. He gets so much pleasure from that. And so, by the way, this is why people should go to register-to-learn-monthly.com, because it helps you achieve mastery in different places. And there's a book that you should read after you finish the Wheel of Time series called The Land. It's a lit RPG saga. Okay. The main character is called Richter, and it's a guy, normal guy, who gets sucked into a video game. And there's stats, and there's leveling up, and it's very addictive. It's very fun to listen to. And it's exactly what we are describing, except he is playing in a video game. And you know what? When I just turned 26, like literally like in May.
Oh, same. When in May?
May 4th.
Oh, I'm May the 11th, so you're a week older than I am.
And so my brother makes me a video every year for my birthday, and we do this for each other. And so this year, he in this audiobook, when Richter levels up, and like you see him go through, like it goes, "Papa, you have leveled up. You have unlocked the achievement of blah blah blah. You are now a journeyman apprentice." And so Tyler made this audio track for me. He's like, "Papa, you have turned 26. You have unlocked level 4 body. Blah blah blah." And like ability, so he just like kind of like took the things that I got done that year and made them into like sounding exactly like a video game. And it was like such a cool thing to listen to.
Oh, nice. That's really cool. So just a few other things I wanted to ask you about, and we've got some questions from people on the thing. So if we get to those first, so we've got a question from a guy called Falcrix, who says, "Cliff, if you had the chance to go back in time and give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would that be?"
So, okay, if it's not to my younger self, but to other people's younger self, it's listen to audiobooks, because the amount. So. Valentine loves this as well. There's a guy that we know, Tim Ferriss. I helped him do his TED Talk, I Came to Speak Around. And he has this idea called knowledge is a tree. And so you build your baseline trunk in like school and elementary school, and then like you build the branches, and then every time you read a book, every time you have an interaction, it's like a new leaf of information. And if you have a branch to put that leaf on, it stays. And so you want to build the most fleshed out tree possible. And some people don't have a tree. They have a bunch of brush that is not connected, and you want that to be connected. And this is why it makes sense, by the way, to reread books, because if you reread a book a second time, you'll catch those leaves that time. They won't float away. The other way of looking at it, it's like you have a Google map, and like some places you zoom in and it's like really fleshed out, and some places you zoom in and it's pixelated. You want to build a mental model of the universe. The more accurate you're at that mental model of the universe, the better your decision making. And so from the youngest age possible, you want to make an accurate map of the world. And the 2 best ways to do that, number 1 is consume a ton of information. And the easiest way to do that, the most information-dense thing in the world, is books. For example, Alexander Hamilton's biography is 40 hours long. He lived a 50-year life. So there's basically an hour for each hour of his life. And so I've read the biographies of all the founders of the United States, all major entrepreneurs, all major artists, etc., and scientists. And I just learned so much from their lives. So number 1 is read books. Is the best. If I could give myself advice from when I was 18, I read The 4-Hour Body, and I started counting calories. I tried to eat 3,000 calories per day. I'm very, very skinny naturally, and I wanted to get bigger. What I didn't know is how to count macronutrients. So it's the breakdown between fat, protein, and carbs. And specifically, the way that I now do it is I eat 1.3 grams of protein per pound of body weight. I eat like 55 grams of fat per day, and then I change my calories based on if I'm trying to gain weight or lose weight. And so if I want to like get the ideal, I eat like 2,100 calories a day. So the second I learned that and about DEXA scans, which is how to figure out like the breakdown between the fat and the muscle in your body, my ability to just like change how my body looked skyrocketed.
Okay,
so that's
okay. So on that note, this is what I'm trying to do at the moment. So a few weeks ago, I got this like online personal trainer in lockdown, just some dude that I was chatting to on Twitter, and then I featured on his podcast, and then we were talking about health, and I was like, hey, you guys do personal training. Anyway, so he's given me these sort of macros to hit, and at the moment so I weigh 72 kilograms, and the strategy is that we're trying to kind of cut first and then kind of clean bulk on top of that. And we're going for 160 grams of protein per day, 250 grams of carbs, and like 50 grams of fat. And so every other day I'm doing this kind of like home workout thing. But I've read the 4 Hour Body, but I didn't quite read it. I haven't quite absorbed it to the extent that I have the 4 Hour Workweek, which I've read like at least 8 times, and every time I read it I learn different lessons. Where's a good place to get started with all this kind of stuff? And you said that I should be doing DEXA scans.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to show you 2 things. Number 1, I made a post about this. Not even Cliff Weitzman.
Yeah.
I made this post recently. So this is where I started. I actually was even more skinnier than this, and this is where I am at now.
Yep.
And so the caption here is how I gained 27 pounds of muscle while in college. And the body is like a chemical equation. And so the rules that you need to know is, number 1, your daily caloric intake is equal to the amount of energy that you expend during the day, plus, and that's like a function of like what it takes to keep you breathing and keep you warm, but also like the energy that you consume. So the daily grams of protein that you eat times 4, plus grams of fat times 9, plus grams of carbs times 4 is equal to your total daily calories.
Yep.
You need to eat a caloric excess to gain muscle. You're never, ever, ever going to gain muscle if you don't eat a caloric excess. And so the only way to figure out what your maintenance amount is to weigh yourself every morning for 7 days, find the average, but also track everything that you eat in MyFitnessPal.
Yep.
And then you will see if eating 2,100 calories a day, did you gain, did you lose, or did you stay the same? Now, if you want to gain 1 pound of body weight, you need to eat in excess of 3,500 calories.
So per week, I guess.
Per week,
yeah,
exactly. So divided by 7, you need to eat 500 calories extra per day if you want to gain 1 pound. Or if you want to lose a pound, you need to eat 500 calories less than your maintenance. And you need to drink enough water. Fat does not make you fat. So by the way, I would increase your fat from 50 to like 55. And if you know that math, that's all you need to know. And so the other thing that I will show you is, go here. I have like a bunch of like docs that I live my life by. So let me grab my fitness doc. Cool. So there's this thing called a DEXA scan. And a DEXA scan, I was so glad when I discovered it. It costs like $45 to go do. And it's a scan of your body. It takes like 7 minutes. And it tells you exactly what % of your body is fat, what % of your body is muscle, what % of your body is bones. Now, that's so important because you cannot properly judge progress just by your weight on a scale, because you don't know what amount is muscle and what amount is fat. And if you gain a bunch of weight, but it's all muscle, that's fantastic. So the mirror is one place to check, but the DEXA is how to really figure it out by numbers. So when I got my first DEXA scan about a year ago, I was 180 pounds, 20% body fat. And so within those 37 days, I got another DEXA scan. You can see that I gained 2.1 pounds of muscle. I lost 4 pounds of fat. I gained half a pound of muscle. I lost 6 pounds of fat. I lost a little bit of muscle, but I lost more fat. And so in that time frame, I went from 20% body fat to 11.5% body fat. And I went from 138 pounds of muscle to still the same at 138 pounds of muscle. And I'm like, great, I achieved what I wanted to do. This is that clean cut that you're talking about. Yep. And so now I'm starting to do a clean bulk. So during this time frame, what I was usually eating was 1,900 calories a day with 190 grams of protein per day, 55 grams of fat per day, and about 130 grams of carbs per day. So
that's for the cut.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is for someone who weighs 180 pounds. Yes. So you can adjust it as you need. So usually what I do is find your maintenance. If you're someone who is my size, your maintenance is about 2,100 calories. So I eat 1,900 or 1,800 and eat the same amount of protein as you do in overall calories. Just remove 10.
Yeah.
This is in grams. And then eat at least 55 grams of fat to maintain hormone production and testosterone. And then the rest you fill in with carbs. So then now I just started bulking. And so you can see that I gained 4.3 pounds of muscle. Obviously, I gained some fat. And I'm going to do this until I hit probably like overall muscle mass of like 150. and then I'll cut again, and then I'll reach my baseline, and then I'm gonna continue working out for maintenance. But there won't be too much more that I can do to make myself happier by improving the way my body looks, and so I'll focus on becoming a god when it comes to tricking and parkour, and then I'll focus on using. That's really progress.
That's amazing. And you said kind of superhero standards. So what does that kind of mean for you?
Oh, okay. So superhero standards. Cool. So if I go to the next sheet here, this is superhero measurements. My goal is the body of Thor, and for the most part, I've matched it. So I'm like 5'10", and so there's like the 45% of that overall inches is what my waist should be: shoulders, chest, arms, hips, whatever. So you can see this is like when I started measuring, and you can see and this is literally just with a tape measure.
Yeah.
So we can see that now, as of the end of May, I can get my waist a little bit thinner, but my shoulders are 50.5 out of 51, great. My chest is 43 inches out of 44, great. My arms are 15.25 out of 16.5. So you can see here, I basically hit 100%, 100%, 97%, 92%. So my arms need to get a little bit bigger, but I need to maintain that while my waist is a certain size. So I'm going to bulk up so that my arms get bigger, and then I'm going to cut down so that my abs show and my waist is where I want it to be, and then I'll be there. So this is with regards to measurements. The other thing that you can think about is like superhero strength standards, because the size of your body is usually a function of how strong you are. So the best thing to do if you want to either gain muscle or lose fat is actually compound lifts. You burn as many calories doing weight training as you do doing running and cardio. So if you might as well just use weight training. And the reason is that when you lift, your body is building muscle that entire time, and it'll do it for like 24 hours after. And so you want to do bench press, you want to do shoulder press, you want to do squats, you want to do pull-ups, you want to do arm curls, you want to do dips with weighted belts. And so those are the things that I do, and I get the rest of my team to do it with me. And at this point, we've gotten like, I think on our team we have 20 people, like 12 of them have gained at least 15 pounds of muscle since I set up their macros for them. And I've earned at least 20 different people 6-packs. And it's just like, once you get the science, it just makes it so easy to make progress on it. And it doesn't matter, because like in the business, sometimes it sucks, sometimes you don't have as much progress as you want. But with fitness, like, you can always have it.
Damn. Okay. No, that's really cool. So I've been doing this kind of macro tracking, MyFitnessPal, weighing myself every morning for the last 4 weeks. Now, 4 weeks, and it's just kind of the beginning. But already I'm seeing, and if you look at the averages, my weight is kind of slightly going down. And I look in the mirror, I'm like, oh, I you know, in the right sort of lighting, I can see a little bit more definition on the abs, which I've just never seen before. And there's just something very kind of satisfying about the long-term-ish kind of leveling up of it, which is kind of cool.
It's amazing. It's literally like being a character in a video game, that as you develop levels, your body starts to change, and you get bigger, and you get a sword or whatever. It's like kind of nice.
What's your exercise routine when you're traveling? Do you forget about it, or do you kind of...
No, I don't forget about it. I love it. Like I said, there are things that I prioritize, and they are the priority, and everything else I don't care about at all. So I do not care about eating in fancy restaurants. If I go to a fancy restaurant with friends, my macros are my #1 priority. So unless there's a dish that really calls out to me, in which case I absolutely will have the chocolate cake with like pasta bolognese, I turn to the waiter and I ask, hey, is it possible to get just like 2 chicken breasts? And like, 2 chicken breasts? And we're like, yeah, just 2 plain chicken breasts. And they're like, I guess. And I'm like, can you add like a little bit of like leafy greens on the side too? And he's like, sure. And then like they'll give me the meal, and it'll be like half the price of everybody else's meal because it's not even listed on the menu. But I have like 4x the amount of protein that everybody else had, and none of the fat, and like the right amount of carbs. And so 95% of fitness is diet to begin with. Now, if I'm on the road, I always find a way to find a gym. Usually I'll walk into a hotel. I'll ask them, excuse me, where's the spa? And then I'll go to the spa, or like I'll be like, where's the restaurant? And then I'll find the gym, and I'll just walk into the gym. And like, I don't know, 5% of the time they'll kick me out. But if you don't kick me out, boom, I can work out. And then if there's no fancy hotel around, I'll just go to a local gym, and I pay the $20 to go do 1 workout session. It's more than worth it for me.
Okay. Nice. Okay, that seems really cool. I'm now more excited to continue on this journey. So, final thing I wanted to talk to you about. Let's talk about fantasy books. So,
let's talk about
like, oh my god, when I discovered, like, I thought Harry Potter was like the pinnacle of like, I just could not imagine anything being even coming close to being better than Harry Potter. And then I discovered Brandon Sanderson, and like, oh my god, like I've just been preaching the gospel to everyone that I've met. Like, guys, Brandon Sanderson, my hero. Yeah, so these days, what I usually suggest to people is that they start with Mistborn because it's quite kind of fast paced, and then I kind of usually suggest that take a break from Sanderson, go for Name of the Wind, which is amazing on audiobook, and then Stormlight, and then Wheel of Time, which is kind of the order that I did it in. But I am sort of since starting, so since 2017, I've been a 1xer on Audible. I tried to 1.5x and 2x it sometimes, and that was like, well, Michael Kramer's a very good narrator, and Hi Lord Amaram sounds a lot cooler than Hi Lord Amaram. But like as of like 2 weeks ago, I started 2 to 3xing my Wheel of Time on Audible, and it's completely changed the game. And I'm like, I can't believe I didn't discover this sooner. So I feel like I've torn through book 7 of Wheel of Time in the last like 4 days, and it's gonna finish very soon. So like, what do I listen to next? Can you give me like a reading list?
Yes, absolutely. So I just sent you one actually, and so, oh my God, Reskin, dude, you have to listen to Reskin.
Is that The Land?
No, this is a different one.
Oh, okay.
They're both different. So there is a book called The King Killer Chronicles, and it's about this guy who, it's like a Game of Thrones-esque world.
Wait, The King Killer Chronicles, that's Name of the Wind.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
Sorry, not the King Killer Chronicles. It's King's Dark Tidings.
Oh, okay.
King's Dark Tidings.
Yeah.
And so this guy, he wakes up and he's in this like fort, and he has been trained from the time he was born to be the best warrior ever. But he's not only trained as a warrior; he's trained in politics, he's trained in economics, he's trained in everything. And there's a series of events, and he ends up outside of this fort, and then he goes through life. And so there's a concept in fantasy called an OP character, an overpowered character, and they're the most fun characters to follow because their lives are awesome. And so usually they have a like skill development arc.
Yeah.
Reskin does not have a skill development arc. He starts off as the most powerful person that you can be.
Oh,
not
sick.
He has money because he's ridiculously smart and he's ridiculously good at the combat. But what he's lacking is EQ, emotional intelligence. And what he's lacking is a purpose and a meaning in life. And so he just like goes through town, and he like makes friends randomly, but like he doesn't know what friendship is, blah blah blah. And then like someone attempts to rob him, and it's like two of these little kids, and like he obviously like catches them, and they're like, "Oh no, we robbed the wrong person!" And like their handler, who's like getting them to rob people, is like, "Oh, you gotta run!" And like they have a code system for how dangerous somebody is. So the most dangerous one is like code red, and the kid is like, "Oh no, he's a code red," and he's like, "I'm not a code red, I'm a code black." And then he like catches their leader, catches his leader, and like basically becomes the leader of this underground gang, while at the same time like going and like fraternizing with like the aristocracy. And then like this is the kind of the beginning of the book. So King's Dark Tidings is a great one to start on. The next one.
All right.
Next one is called Red Rising. If you haven't read it.
I haven't read it.
You have read it?
No, I haven't. This is amazing. Oh, yes.
Amazing. So, Red Rising, the main character, his name is Darrow, and he is a slave, very similar to Kaladin. And we start from there, except it's set in a dystopian world where you have like super genetic engineering, and it's like a multiplanetary species. Incredible character development, incredible perseverance. Could not love this book more. Could not set it down. So that's the one. The next one I would recommend is The Land. You'll get very addicted to The Land. There's one called The Solar Clipper, also interplanetary, also a character who just like, it's almost like a video game. There's like it's almost like he's a pirate, but he's not a pirate. It's like a trading ship, and there's a manual, and as you progress, you like gain more skills in this manual, and most people just like go after one discipline, but he like works really hard and he does all disciplines at the same time. And like he gets bullied and like he loses all his money. It's a very, very good series. The next one to consider is, oh my God. So if you like Harry Potter, have you listened to Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality?
I haven't. I tried reading it once and I just didn't really get into it, but I haven't given it a second shot. Didn't
give it a proper enough shot. So get the full PDF, put it on Speechify, and listen to it on Speechify. And so it's Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality.
Oh, on the note of Harry Potter, have you come across Harry Potter and the Year of Darkness?
No.
Oh man, so This is like the only piece of fan fiction I've ever read, and it's fucking incredible. It's the Deathly Hallows written from Neville's perspective. So all of the shit that goes down in the Deathly Hallows in Hogwarts.
I'm so glad you want to
So I stumbled across this when I was in Japan in sort of at the age of 19 for some research project, and every single night I was like, I cannot wait to go home because I just want to read more Harry Potter and the Years of Darkness. Yeah, that's the one. Dumbledore's Army and the Year of Darkness. It's written by this like English teacher whose daughters were like annoyed that Harry Potter had ended, so he wanted to like give them some more joy, and it filled the hole in my heart. Like, it's so good. It's so good.
So, by the way, this is how to find any book. You just search the name of the book and then .pdf, and it'll come up for you. Boom.
And
there we go.
Someone on Reddit will have some kind of link to it.
Yep. And okay, this is like Harry Potter and the.
Oh, it's by Less Wrong. Oh, I follow that blog. It's a good blog.
Great blog. Yeah. So this book is Harry Potter, except that Petunia does not marry Vernon Dursley. She marries a PhD at Oxford or Cambridge who's like a physicist. And the motto of his family is one can never have enough books. And Harry is a genius, but socially awkward. And he does scientific experiments to like see that magic is real. And so he lives by the scientific method. So he shows up at Hogwarts and he uses the scientific method, because wizards do not use the scientific method, to improve magic significantly and also problem solve. So my problem with Harry is like he's extremely reckless and not responsible. This guy is super responsible.
Yeah.
And he does not do stupid things. He only does smart things. And this book takes you all the way through the entire series. And again, this character also like struggles with the meaning of life and like how do you level up? And so you will love this series. I have never met anyone who has read it and not been extremely passionate. This is Harry Potter for adults. Like, this is if like you are an adult, you have developed like a good view of the world, and you want to relive Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. Oh. There's a couple of more Harry Potter fan fictions that I really liked. One is told from the perspective of Hermione, and like where Hermione is the main character,
okay.
But the book goes in very different directions because Hermione is the main character. But I'm really, really excited to hear Harry Potter and the Year of Darkness. That's incredible.
Yes, this is good. Right. I've got a list which will keep me occupied for at least the next 6 months. So thank you for that.
I'll just give you a couple more
yes,
books.
Please.
Heart by Brandon Sanderson is also really good if you haven't read it.
Which one?
Steelheart.
Steelheart. No, I haven't read it. That's actually, following that dude. What's his name? Marth or some shit? What's his name?
The main character for Steelheart?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think his name is Mark. He's like a teenage boy.
Cool. That's on the list.
And Steelheart is very short. Way of Kings is the best one. Like, everybody, read Way of Kings. Yeah. Callendid is the best character of any character I've ever come across in any book ever. Wheel of Time, by the way, I think it's a very, very long series. It's hard to get through.
Yeah, it's really long. I've been on it for the last, I don't know how long. Yeah.
And then the other thing that I would recommend is, outside of the world of fantasy, is if you read historical fiction, is so good, is anything by Ken Follett. So he has a series, the first book is Pillars of the Earth. And essentially the series, he writes it from the perspective of 10 different characters. So one is an orphan, one is a king, one is a priest, one is like a teenage girl, one is a mason. And it's set in like the 1600s. And it's like about those 100 years, but like it's a real story. And then he writes the next book, Winter of the World, about the 1700s, about the descendants of all the previous characters. And he writes this all the way up to like the Cold War and World War I and World War II. And I learned more history from those books than any like advanced placement history class I've ever taken. Amazing. And like you feel so close with the characters. And the last category that I'll say, and then I'll shut up, is biographies. Theodore Roosevelt, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Actually, wait, if you guys want to see all my favorite books, Medium books, I use Alfred Shortcuts for all the links that I often use. So if you just search like Cliff Weitzman books, Medium, these are like the 20 most influential books that I've read in my life out of like the 1,500 books that I've read. See, like even the most important essays, On Wealth by Emerson and a couple of YC essays and stuff like that. And then the other thing that you can go is if you liked like some of the content of this talk, I often like give talks at universities. And so if you go to the videos on my channel, you'll find just like a bunch of like me talking to schools, going a little bit deeper into some of these philosophies. In Medium, you can also find some of my like life principles that I codified. And then Kaladin, Fight with the Speech, and my goal is to play Kaladin in the movie. And so this is my training to be Kaladin in the movie. So read Way of Kings and then watch the movie when it comes out eventually.
Oh, amazing. And I think that is a great place to end this. Thank you so much for taking the time. I've learned a lot. I've got all these book recommendations, and I'm sure everyone following along has really appreciated the insights.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. For anyone listening, if you want to check out Speechify, go to getspeechify.com and download the Mac app, or go to the App Store and search Speechify, and it'll change your life. You can find more of my stuff, Cliff Weitzman, CliffWeitzman, on Instagram or YouTube or Medium. And when COVID is gone, you should come. You have a place to stay in LA whenever you want.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a plan. I just need to get a visa for America, because the really annoying thing,
yeah,
the really annoying thing is that normally when you're a British citizen, you've got this visa waiver thing. But I went to Sudan like last year for some medical project, and that blacklists me from this visa waiver. So I have to apply for a visa. But then, even more annoyingly, I got arrested in Paris for flying a drone. Like sometime in 2019, and that puts me on the sort of tick the box of have you ever been arrested or charged with a crime anywhere in the world. So now I have to have an interview, and I just haven't got around to having this interview yet at the American Embassy. I need to make a plan a legitimate plan to go to America, so then I can apply for this like 5-10 year visa, and then I'll be able to come in and out as I please. But it's proving to be annoying.
But I'm sure that you'll pull it off. At this point, I've gotten people like O1 visas, green cards, a bunch of different immigration stuff. I think that learning how to work the immigration system is actually one of the best skills that you can develop. So, for example, I got a 10-year Chinese visa on top of having like a U.S. citizenship, British and Israeli citizenship. And man, like the world opens up to you once you like start figuring out how to hack these systems. And like it actually isn't that expensive to like hire a lawyer online to do most of this work for you.
Okay.
So that's something that you should also consider, because you can just outsource the work to someone else.
Yeah, I was thinking of getting an O1 visa because I was thinking that I could possibly make the case for it based on the YouTube channel, like whatever, like potentially.
You qualify.
Sick.
You do it.
Cool. If you know,
filing usually is like $6,000.
Okay, cool. If you know someone, then can you Skype it to me afterwards, and we'll. Good stuff. All right. Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you in the next episode.